Hello. Hello? Yes. Can I have your attention, please? Welcome to Samfundsmøte Fake News in collaboration with the ISFIT 23 Polarization, the International Student Festival here in Trondheim. Fake news is a term that has become widespread in the last few years. It has always been a phenomenon, but the time we live in now is still quite unique. We can point at several people who get their legitimacy and power through fake news. Among them, the presidentship of Trump was filled with untrue statements about the election and the pandemic. Putin is now currently leading a war where he's sending out propaganda about Ukraine, NATO, and the war itself. And in Brazil, Bolsonaro is purposely spreading lies to the population and doubt about the country's election system, much like Trump did in 2020. Propaganda and fake news has always existed, but do we see a new trend in the scope of its reach? Do we live in a time where the easy access to information and its spread on social media makes the truth more blurred? Has social media made it easier to reach power and legitimacy through half-truths or even fake news? To discuss this today, we have Torkjell Leira and Snorre Valen, and to lead the discussion, we have the Vice President of ISFIT 23, Lars Ingar Tutteren. My name is Unna, and I am today's leader of the meeting, and the meeting is set.
And my name is Annika Taule, and I will be today's secretary. Let's see, there. The meeting agenda is as follows. The meeting is in session. 2. Approval of the agenda. 3. Information from the board. 4. Nybygg update. 5. Political 5. 6. Speech by the ISFIT president. 7. Presentation by Torkjell Leira. 8. Presentation by Snorre Valen. 9. Performance by Trondheim Studentersangforening. 10. Break. 11. Discussion with the panelists with questions from the audience. 12. Any other businesses. 13. Critique of the meeting. And 14. The meeting is adjourned. I would like to inform Storsalen that it has been added 2 points to the agenda today, and that is Nybygg update after point 3 and speech from the ISFIT president after political 5. Are there any objections to the agenda? There appears to be none. Can Storsalen approve the meeting agenda with acclamation? Thank you.
Before we get to hear from our guests, the board has some information to give.
Yes, the board has following to announce. This Friday, the students got to meet Ola Borten Moe, the Minister of Science and Higher Education. And the board is currently working on the themes for the next semester's Samfundsmøte. If you have any suggestions or things you would like to improve, just send us an email to styre@samfunnet.no. And the 4th of November, the board will have a styrevaffel, where you can come and talk to us about Samfunnet, the voting system, Nybygg, or the Samfundsmøtene, or whatever you like. So I hope we'll see you there. That was all the information from the board. And now Rådet is going to read the disciplinary decision, H05.
Ærede Storsal, jeg tar det her på norsk. Mitt navn er Sveinung Varsin. Jeg er da leder av rådet. Rådet har med fullmakt gitt av styret behandlet styrets disciplinærsak H05. Rådets vedtak er som følger. Rådet har vedtatt å idømme et medlem utestengelse fra Studentersamfunnets område og virke, bortsett fra medlems skjøte av verv, i 1 uke til og med 23.10.2022. Rådet finner det skjerpende at medlemmet innehar et tillitsverv ved Studentersamfunnet. Medlemmet idømmes også til formelt beklage overfor de fornærmede i disciplinærsaken. Dommen er gjeldende fra 16.10.2022. Takk for meg.
Then we have come to point 4, Nybygg update. Samfunnet is currently building a construction in addition to the building we have today. And we want to update our members about the construction process as well as the work the board does on finding money for finishing Nybygg and the work done on adapting the organization. I will give the word to Annika again. Do you want to go up on the podium?
Hello, my name is Annika and I'm a member. Let's see if we can get it up on the screen. Can we get the presentation up on the screens? Good. Yes, I can start to inform a bit before we get the presentation up. As you know, Samfundsmøte is currently expanding with 4,800 square meters. And we are building 3 new stages and 3 new bars and a lot of work premises. The building is expected to be finished in January 2024. And the construction is currently going as planned. If you have taken a look out back, you can see the black box. That's going to be one of the 3 stages. Yes, and here you can see the drawings of Nybygg. And this is the black box, or is going to be the black box. It's the roof of the black box. Here are the floor plans, and as you can see, we are going to be expanding the surface, the ground surface of Nybygg, and we are going to build it out little by little to keep supporting the existing building. And we are still working on founding for Nybygg. We have just been granted 10 million Norwegian kroners from the municipality. So that's really cool. It happened this Thursday, so we're proud of that, and we're hoping that others are coming and wanting to support Nybygg as well. We are also in contact with other potential partners, as the county municipality, private companies, and Samskipnaden here in Trondheim. And we also have a fundraiser, as many of you might have heard about before. So everyone can give a contribution to Nybygg if you would like. You can just scan the QR code, as you can see here as well. Depending on how much you want to give, you can, for example, get your name on a wall in Nybygg or a name on one of the chairs here in Storsalen. And if you have any other questions about Nybygg or the process, you can just come talk to me or any of the other board members, or send us an email, or show up at Styrevaffel in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Annika. Now we have come to point 5, political 5. At this point, the podium or talerstolen is open for anyone to talk about anything, political or not. If you want to express your opinions in Norwegian, that's also fine. Are there any opinions here?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Mathea and I am a member. Next Thursday, we are announcing the next Student Peace Prize winner of 2023, and I would therefore like to talk about the importance of student activism. Because we see that protests and demonstration, they often start within the student communities. In times of crisis, it is students or it's student activism that has been a crucial force of bigger social changes. Students all around the world, they are at the forefront when peace and freedom are under threat. We could see that in the student protest in Paris in 1968 that spread across all of Europe, or at the Tiananmen Square protest in Beijing in 1999, or to the fall of the Berlin Wall, or the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in 2004, during the Arab Spring in 2011, the Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong, the Fees Must Fall movement in South Africa, and this list, it goes on. And even though students are such a crucial force and part of contributing to this bigger social changes, they are often neglected by both politicians and the media, and they are often forgotten. Among the Student Peace Prize earlier winners, I would also like to talk about Masheed Tavakoli. He won the prize in 2013. Last month, on the 23rd of September, he was arrested by Iranian authorities. And Masheed, he played a key role in exposing the case of Mahsa Amini, which you all know was killed by the morality police some weeks ago. Masheed, he has also been promoting peace, democracy, and human rights in Iran for many, many years. And right now, he is in prison in the notorious Evin prison in Iran, along with other political prisoners, journalists, activists, and students. Last weekend, we could even see that Evin prison was set on fire and their lives there are still in danger. So with the protest in Iran, we are obligated to defend Masheed and others in the same situation as him. The extreme levels of brutality used in the protest, they are unacceptable. So we will not forget about Masheed. We will continue to tell his story. So everyone, let us stand in solidarity with Masheed and the rest of the people in Iran. You can, for example, do this by signing Amnesty's petition End the Protest Bloodshed in Iran. Here they call on states to set up an independent UN mechanism to investigate and ensure accountability for the most serious crimes under international law in Iran. Some may call the students naive, but know that in this naivety, there is also hope, power, will, and courage. So everyone, I hope you will join us here in Storsalen at Thursday at 7 to celebrate and highlight yet another winner of the Student Peace Prize, because they do deserve all our support and solidarity. So I hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to say something here? I do not see anyone running up. Then we have the speech of the ISFIT president. As mentioned, this is a collaboration between us at the board and ISFIT 23. So I'd like to welcome Åse on the stage.
Hello, my name is Åse and I'm a member, and I'm also the president of ISFIT 23. So what is fake news? Is it just another term for disinformation? For me, fake news is a quite broad term that I can relate to both news that is directly wrong and news that is mostly right, but then you twist it enough so it becomes wrong. One story can completely change directions if you push the right buttons, and that's what scares me the most about this topic. We live in a 24/7 news cycle bubble where you get hit by headlines all day. How can we filter out what's real or not? How do I know that what you say to me and what you base your arguments upon is real? These are really hard questions to answer, and I believe we should talk more about it. Today we will discuss some topics related to how fake news is strategically placed in elections and how disinformation is spread to the extent where people build their beliefs and political directions on wrong and twisted facts. If we are to solve world problems, we need to have the facts right before we start a debate, or if not, it's wasted, in my opinion. It's like this test you have in high school when the teacher comes to you and say that, well, your sources are wrong. Wikipedia is not the source you can use, actually. So do the test again and find some real sources. As an adult, you don't have that teacher to tell you what's right or wrong. We need to learn from each other to find the right facts and fight the fake news and disinformation in order to create meaningful dialogue. When I thought about how to formulate this short speech, I typed fake news space and then enter. And then Google automatically filled in generator. So it was like fake news generator. And then I got 232 million hits on that Google search. That's a bit crazy. All these pages, or all these links, they took me to sketchy pages and websites where I could write a short story, and they made this trust-looking design of a headline that I can use. So I don't know if this is commonly being used to create content for right-winged or left-wing Twitter profiles, but what I fear is that people don't know how easy it is to create these images or to make these cases of your own. How do you explain to someone, all you think you know is not true? The whole base of your facts you build your arguments upon is not true. And most of the headlines you're seeing every day, they are not true. I mean, it's much easier to convince someone that aliens landed on Earth, rather than telling them that the foundations of their understanding is false. Fake news is shaking the foundation of democracy when creating fake headlines. It what really affects people in elections, and that clickbaits are more important than the fact itself. So why is this theme relevant for ISFIT and the theme polarization? Well, polarization creates a division between groups of people in a lot of different ways. Bringing fake news into the picture, claiming that the other side has these awful stories and opinions, making the wall between polarized groups even stronger. We know that fake news is a tool being used to create enemies and more polarized group of people. In ISFIT, we try to break those boundaries and make people find the facts and fight the misinformation. We want people to come to a place when they can meet students from the whole world and challenge what they have learned. We want them to learn to be each other's teachers and to learn from each other when their sources are wrong and that they need to do the tests again. I'm really looking forward to this discussion today about fake news, and I hope we can all learn how to fight it. Thank you.
Thank you, Åse. Now we've come to our guests. It's their turn to speak. First, I would like to welcome Torkjell Leira to the podium. Torkjell Leira is an expert on Brazil. He has studied and worked in and with Brazil for many years. And this year he published the book, The Art of Killing a Democracy, which tells about the anti-democratic direction that Bolsonaro's Brazil is going towards. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Samfundsmøte. Thank you, ISFIT, for inviting me. My name is Torkjell Leira. I'm not a member, but I grew up in Trondheim, and I used to walk around in these corridors for many, many years, since I was 16, with my older brother's ID. So I'm thrilled to be back at Samfundsmøte, so thank you very much. I'm actually quite emotional here, standing and looking out on all of you. I'm invited here because of this book, called in English, The Art of Killing a Democracy, the story of Bolsonaro's Brazil. Bolsonaro is the current president of Brazil, and it's quite a heavy title, but I will now try in 8 minutes, just in 10 slides, to walk you through the threats to democracy, including how President Bolsonaro and his allies are using fake news. The point of departure for this book was another book, which is a classic in political science, a modern classic. It's called How Democracies Die. And there I want to point out two citations. I don't have a screen here, so I might not see what's actually standing there. But the point is that since the end of the Cold War, most democratic breakdowns have not been caused by soldiers or generals. It's been caused by elected governments themselves, meaning the elected governments are themselves destroying democracy. A second citation, the tragic paradox of this route to authoritarian regimes is that the elected leaders, They use the democratic institutions, the tools that democracy has given them. They use them gradually, subtly, and also even legally to kill democracy. So it's a very, very harmful development we're seeing in the world. And I have looked into Brazil with this frame. This picture is of, these two pictures are of Brazil's current president, Mr. Jair Bolsonaro. He was born in 1955. The picture to the left is the official photo when he took over as elected president in January 2019. He won the elections in 2018 with quite a good margin. The picture to the right is the same Jair Bolsonaro in 1977 when he graduated from the School of War of the Brazilian army. And this is a key to understand his thoughts and his visions about the world. He was formed and he had his military career when the Cold War was at its most intense and the military dictatorship in Brazil was at its most violent. So this has followed him. So to understand Jair Bolsonaro, we need to understand that his world is a Cold War world of enemies and friends. It's black and white. But he's not alone. We've seen authoritarian leaders being elected in many different countries over the last years. Putin came to power for the first time in 1999. We have Erdogan in Turkey. We have Orban in Hungary. We have, you see the list. You have all these list people are mentioned as these right-wing authoritarian leaders. And the last one, going to Europe, in Mrs. Meloni, appointed today as Italy's new prime minister, heading the most right-wing government since Mussolini's fascist regime in the 30s. So this is happening in many countries, in many continents all over the world. And there are so many similarities in these countries that the research environments and institutes all over the world, they're pointing to some call it a playbook. A playbook of wannabe dictators is one of the most recognized institutes in the world studying these issues. The Varieties of Democracy, the VDEM Institute, connected to the University of Gothenburg, having three phases in what's going on in these countries. First, these new elected governments try to curb the universities, the civil society, and the media. They want to take control over the narrative in society. Second, they attack political opponents. They use fake news, and they even use the state's own information channels to spread disinformation, which is the topic of today's meeting. And third, then they attack the formal institutions, elections, the Supreme Court, etc. And this is a perfect description of what's going on in Brazil today. The only difference, in my view, is that what is here described as three different phases, first one, then two, then three. In Brazil, it all happens at the same time, all at once. And I'll give you one piece of, one example of fake news from last elections. We're now just 8 days from the second round of this year's presidential election. Jair Bolsonaro is running for a second period. His main opponent is Lula da Silva, who was the president for 2 periods in the early 2000s. So it's a central-left candidate, Lula, and an extreme-right candidate, Bolsonaro. This is what he used in the campaign in 2018, and it says that feministas invadem a igreja, defecam e fazem sexo, in Portuguese. In English, feminists, they invade a church, they defecate, and they have sex, and illustrated by these 3 photos. 2 of these photos are actually from Norway. They were taken in the Cathedral of Oslo in 2010 or 11, when the activist group called Fuck for Forest, they went in and they made a porn film in the Cathedral of Oslo to try to gather money and resources for the world's rainforest. A really brilliant initiative, but very questionable tactics and means, if you understand what I mean. Yeah. But this is being used in the Brazilian presidential elections. as an attack on the left. And what's interesting here, they don't mention Lula, they don't mention Bolsonaro, but they mention feminists, which is, in most people's mind, most linked to the left. So 8 of the 20 most circulated fake news on WhatsApp in the last elections, 18 were attacks on the left side or on the left candidates, while 1 was an attack on the right candidate and 1 was kind of neutral. So it says that the right, they are the best in doing this. Trying to conclude, where does it all come from and why do we see so much similarities? This is a picture, I don't know, on the left we see Jair Bolsonaro's son, Eduardo Bolsonaro, so it's the president's son, in 2018 in New York with Mr. Steve Bannon. And he says, it was a pleasure to meet Mr. Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's main strategist in the elections in 2016, and we agreed to gather forces to fight together, especially against cultural Marxism. So these are the concepts, and this is the worldview, and these are the allies of the Bolsonaro family. And it's not only the president's son. This is the first visit of Jair Bolsonaro in the United States as a recently elected president in 2019. And we see on his left side, Mr. Steve Bannon. So these are the people, and these are the concepts, and this is the worldview that Brazil's current president has. Then, just to conclude, this is a picture I actually took myself, doing research for that book I just showed you. And he's so charming among his supporters. He's brilliant. I've never been so impressed by a politician in being nice and taking photos and selfies and writing autographs with his. But then, of course, he hates journalists and he hates his political opponents. He says they should be killed. But I was there as a researcher. And also, it was, trying, yes, I take there a selfie with one of my Brazilian friends, Jorge. But then, I actually got the chance to make a question to him, asking, Mr. President, how can I just have a conversation with you? I didn't say interview because he hates journalists, and he would have said none at once. But then he said, well, how much time do you need? And I hadn't even thought it was a chance So I said, 10 minutes? Mr. President, 10 minutes, can I have 10 minutes? And then he looked over my left shoulder saying to another person in his assessor, his rådgiver in English, what would that be? Advisors, thank you. Saying something about the agenda. And then he got the answer, but I couldn't hear what he said because there were so many people cheering and singing and clapping. But then he looked me into the eye and said, would you like to have breakfast with me tomorrow morning? And then I said the right thing. I said yes. So the day after, the day after I was there in the presidential palace in Brasilia with Mr. Jair Bolsonaro, having a 45-minute conversation with him. And also, it's not only fake news in social media. He's living out of lies and half-truths, as also said in the introduction. This is the world they want us to live in, a world where what is true, what is false, they don't want us to have any connection to the real world. That is the way that these populist right-wing leaders, also populist left-wing leaders, and the authoritarian leaders can be there and present themselves as the solution, the strong man or the strong woman. So I want to say thank you once again for the invitation. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Torkjell. Now I would like to welcome Snorre Valen to the podium. Snorre Valen has been a parliamentary politician and deputy leader of Sosialistisk Venstreparti, eller SV. Today he is the political editor of the paper Nidaros and was this year appointed to be the leader of Kringkastingsrådet. The word is yours.
Thank you. Honored Storsal, as mentioned by the honored meeting leaders, I used to be a parliamentarian. And at some point I went through an exercise every parliamentarian has to do, namely media training. And one of the basic, most important lessons we learned regardless of who taught us, be it a communications bureau or our own advisors, was you can always bend the truth and you can always not say the truth directly out loud if it's very uncomfortable, but you can never lie. Under any circumstance, you can never lie directly into a camera, to a journalist, or to an audience. Why was that so? Was it because it was morally wrong? Probably. But perhaps most importantly, it was because you will get caught. And in our political culture, it is associated with great embarrassment, shame, and social pain to be caught lying in public. And at some point since 2012, which was the last time I underwent that kind of training, that stopped being true in a lot of countries, and partly also in Norwegian politics. And why is that? I think Torkjell was onto something very important when he said that at some point what's true and not stops being important as a means of attaining power. Instead of trying to explain what false news is and isn't, I'm going to challenge 3 false assumptions I've made myself about fake news during these past years. And since they are false assumptions, they may come off as somewhat exaggerated, but I guess that's in the spirit of the topic of today. So here goes. Number 1, false assumption number 1 is that fake news are a product of technological development and the emergence of social media, and that it is quintessentially a sign of our times. They aren't. Fake news are as old as news. They have always been there. They have always existed in the cracks and crevices between trustworthy channels of news, and they have thrived in times of great social upheaval or chaos. Fake news facilitated the rise of many a tyrant to power and made their continued rule possible. Fake news laid the foundation for persecution of minorities and dissenters, political and religious. Fake news made the rise of fascism possible in the 1930s. Fake news drove the genocide in Rwanda in 1994 and amplified the messaging of the demagogues that drove the former Yugoslavia to civil war and ethnic cleansing in the early 90s. And the fact that technological developments have helped amplifying the outreach and potential audience of fake news does not mean that fake news as a political means of expressing or attaining power are anything new. Fake news are not happy accidents or unavoidable byproducts of new communication technologies or some kind of epidemic that plagues us. On the contrary, for the most part, fake news are the result of planned actions from determined actors. They are willed and they serve a specific purpose. False assumption about fake news number 2. The purpose of fake news is to make people believe in the false message. But that isn't true either. Making people believe in the messages of fake news is at best a secondary goal. The primary goal is to undermine the notion of truth as a common ground for public debate and decision-making. Fake news makes real news matter less. The more fake news, the less the real news counts when you make a decision. And this is important. The Norwegian Census Bureau, SSB in Norwegian, stated last year in the report that 3 out of 4 Norwegians have made important decisions in their lives based on fake news. It doesn't just affect politics, it affects all of us. When Russia downed a passenger plane in Ukraine in July of 2014, the alternative explanations were readily available from Russian propagandists and surrogates from the very get-go. It was the Ukrainians. The target was Putin's plane. CIA was involved. There was no plane. That the fake news about flight MH17 were mutually exclusive. They couldn't all be true at the same time, even though they came from the same source, was of no matter, no consequence. That wasn't the point. Because at some point, what's really true stops being important. Peter Pomerantsev, a British journalist, has described the end state of these mechanisms in his aptly titled book, Nothing is True and Everything is Possible. He describes a Russian public of today that is in on the joke, so to speak. They know that those in power are lying. Those in power know that the people knows that those in power are lying. And at some point it stops mattering. And why is this important? Well, to quote the American historian Timothy Snyder from On Tyranny, a short pamphlet on the rise of today's fascist threat and authoritarian threat, believe in truth. To abandon facts is to abandon freedom. If nothing is true, then no one can criticize power because there is no basis upon which to do so. If nothing is true, then all is spectacle. The biggest wallet pays for the most blinding lights. End quote. False assumption number 3. Fake news can simply be countered by stating the facts. And unfortunately, acting like some kind of encyclopedic source, always knowing the best, always having the source, does not convince when facing neither individuals nor populations, movements, or even countries that does not adhere to facts for the reasons stated above. We've tried it. Many believed for a long time that simply fact-checking Donald Trump during the campaign of 2016 would somehow embarrass him and make his followers turn away. Needless to say, it didn't work out that way. And the idea that people like Trump or his advisor Steve Bannon would feel ashamed when confronted with their own lies, well, it might have been true for most politicians in most democracies for most of modern times, but that's the exact method and strategy of attaining power that the fringes are now using, because they have no shame. It doesn't matter what is true or false. Being called on it merely confirms the assumption they build upon, which is that we are of the people, we have the simple, understandable explanations. Those challenging me are part of the elite, the academia. They're lying to you and they're trying to blind you with facts and numbers and statistics. There are no easy or simple answers to this. No good answers anyway. But I believe that the only remedies that might work are the slow cooking ones, those that require persistence and patience. 4 out of 5 democracies have declined since 1989 as a result of fake news. So what do we do? Well, I think the persistence and patience route is the right one, such as not falling for the temptation to start tinkering with the facts oneself, even if it means a temporary disadvantage. Or to keep making space for that extra sentence or two that will transform a sentence from being a subjective statement to being a subjective statement based on readily observable facts that no one can challenge, but everyone can interpret and disagree about the interpretation of. But perhaps most importantly, we have to reconsider what terms like balance means and fairness means, for instance, in the media. Is the truth or objectivity always to be found in the middle between two extremes? If that is true, what happens then if one of the extremes starts moving further away from the center? Does freedom of speech mean the right to have op-eds and articles published in mainstream media that is provably false? Are demagogues a victim when they are denied free access to media publications or airwaves or op-ed pages? I will let that last question linger and point out one last thing. I think the most important thing to change is how we build trust. We are kind of spoiled in Norway. We are taught to trust institutions and trust each other because it has worked that way. But trust has to be earned, and we are right now in many democracies learning the hard way that trust can be exploited. I've just made up all of the statistics in this short speech. None of them were even remotely factual, but I suspect that most of you trusted them, and I will let the thought of why you did that linger, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Snorre. Before we take a short break, we have a performance by Trondheim Studentersangforening, one of the student choirs here at Samfundsmøte. So the stage is yours.
Hear you, aura lies between your eyes. Away, away. Sit on my face, sit on my face. I'll sit on your face and then I love you truly. For life can be fine if we both 69. If we sit on our faces and also our faces and play till we're blown away. 69 away, oh yeah.
Thank you all for coming to our concert tonight. Fake news? What? Something else is happening? Oh well. Well, we are still going to sing 2 songs for you tonight, maybe even 3. And first of all, we're going to sing Imagine by John Lennon.
In the merry month of June, from me home I started, left the girls of June, nearly broken hearted, saluted father dear, kissed me darling mother, drank a pint of beer, with grief and tears to smother, then off to reap the corn, and leave where I was born. I cut the stout like torn to banish ghosts, and goblins in a new pair of brogues, rattling all the boats and frightening all the dogs, on the rocky road to Dublin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hunt the hare and turn her down the rocky road, and all the way to Dublin, whack full all the rod. I'm only out at night, I rest the lips so where it's morning by daylight, it's morning light and merry talk and trouble the mule to keep me heart from sinking down and Irishman's mule when every's on for drink to see the last is smart, in all the wine, me curious style with such a if I was hard, the wages I required, till I was almost tired of the rocky road to Dublin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hunt the hare and turn her down the rocky road, and all the way to Dublin, whack full all the rod. In Dublin next arrived, I thought it was a bit to be so soon deprived. The view of the city was then I took the stroll, all among the quality bundle it was stolen in, and there locality something crossed me mind when I looked behind the one, what I find upon me, one was a marching vogue on the rocky road to Dublin. 1, 2, 3, 5, hunt the hare and turn her down the rocky road, and all the way to Dublin, whack full all the rod. From there I got away, my spirits never faded, landed on the quay, the ship was sailing, captain at the mast, he said that's all the glory, paddy when I joined the cabin, paddy, down among the pigs, some funny rigs, done some hard jigs, the water around me bubbling. On the rocky road to Dublin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hunt the hare and turn her down the rocky road, and all the way to Dublin, whack full all the rod. The boys of Liverpool, when we safely landed, called myself a fool. I could no longer stand it, blood began to boil, temper I was losing, for all there is none. They began abusing their arms, hey ho, hey ho, hey ho, hey, down the parade. Quickly clear away for the rocky road. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hunt the hare and turn her down the rocky road, and all the way to Dublin, whack full all the rod. Hunt the hare and turn her down the rocky road, and all the way to Dublin, whack full all the rod. Whack full all the rod.
Thank you. That was obvious fake news. This wasn't imagined, but rocky road to Dublin. You couldn't tell, could you? No. We are Trondheim's student singers. This male choir here from Samfundsmøte in Trondheim. I've heard that the ISFIT topic for next year is about polarization. Our next song will maybe... suddenly new organization. No, this song is maybe describing one of the most polarizing topics we are talking that we have been talking about in Norway for ages, and that's our It's from some of our friends in the East. Yeah, it's a Swedish song. Yeah, so the next song is Hej Dunkom. It's about money and girls, and it's Swedish. So many polarizing topics there.
Hej Dunkom, så länge vi levom, sjung om dans om haven roligt varje dag. Hej Dunkom, kvinn till lerom, så har far min gjort och så gör jag. För 19 daler idag och 20 daler igår. För 19 daler idag och 20 daler igår. Hej, hej Dunkom. Och ändå har jag en riksdaler kvar. Den flickan var hon var söter, som en fager lilja upp på gröna läng. Ögon som gjorde mig blöter, kasta hon på mig, ja lyckliga dräng. För 19 daler idag och 20 daler igår. För 19 daler idag och 20 daler igår. Då har jag en riksdaler, en riksdaler, en riksdaler kvar. Hej Dunkom, så länge vi lever, så länge vi lever. On my
Thank you so much to Trondheim Studentersangforening. We will now take a short break of 10 minutes so we can meet back here at 18:59. Okay, can I have your attention again? So we'll come back after the break. As you see, our guest is now placed in the sofa, ready for the discussion. And during the talk, if anyone has any questions, you can go up to Elina over there. She can take your name, and then you will be able to ask your questions either in English or in Norwegian. So then I would like to give the word to you, Lars Ingar.
Thank you very much, Unna. So my name is Lars Ingar. I'm a member, and I am also the vice president of ISFIT. And I'm going to lead today's panel discussion, or sofaprat, as we call it. And I would really encourage people to ask questions along the way. And of course, if you want to ask that question in Norwegian, that's totally fine. As I think has been touched on many times already tonight, and I think it's very important, propaganda is of course not a new phenomenon, but the time we live in right now still seems quite unique. And I think you mentioned, Snorre, that it's not only technological development. That's an oversimplification to say that social media is the root cause of all of this. But propaganda still existed for a long time, but has fake news become different? Like, in what way is it different now as opposed to earlier? Yeah.
Okay, maybe I can start then. Can you hear me? No, you cannot hear me. Okay, should I do something with its screen? So, still not, well, I think Snorre starts then. And
Okay.
you fix this.
There's no sound from me either.
Okay.
Oh.
So if we... Oops,
Yeah.
I was trying to do it without the microphone. Okay. What is new? That's the very sad thing here. I think nothing is new. Snorre mentioned a really important author called Peter Pomerantsev, writing about Russia. His title and many of his thoughts are built on an earlier female theoretist, scientist called Hannah Arendt. She studied Nazism and Stalinism in the 30s. And these are the same ideas, the same concepts, the same... So it's really sad that we now in 2022 have to study our leaders with the same concepts as as earlier scientists used to study Hitler and Stalin. And I think the key here is that these leaders, they want to erode what's true and what's right and what's wrong. And we both, I think, touch upon it. That's the way, when everything is so unsecure, nothing is true, then political leaders, they can say whatever they want to. They can do whatever they want, and they can be taken seriously, and they can be elected.
Right, exactly. And I found that really interesting, or it seems scary in the sense that you almost talked about Trump as being this machine, and also Bolsonaro and Putin as like being these machines who cannot, in some sense, just not be stopped. They can stand and they can lie all they want, and everyone knows you're lying, but we're all in a sense fine with it. Like, how do we stop that? Like, how do you like, for example, like how did you stop Trump, and how would you stop Bolsonaro?
Yeah, I have no idea, to be honest. I think we have to compartmentalize a lot more than that. I don't think there's one single answer, but I think that civic duty and civic courage and a sense of responsibility gets you a long way. I think most of us, regardless of generation, whether you are a student now in 2022 or pushing 40 like me, or beyond 40 like Torkjell. Sorry.
Right.
I think we have one thing in common. We've been taught that things work. They work out fine. We have a democracy based on trust. We won't get fooled by people we trust. The newspapers print real news, and so on. So we get a bit paralyzed in the face of a whole new mode of informational warfare. and subverting democracy. And I think instead of asking the very big question, how can we stop this, I think the best way to start out is asking ourselves, well, what could I change? What responsibility do I have? For instance, I'm an editor of an arguably very small newspaper, but I think it's okay anyway. And I think the media has a lot to discuss in terms of the boundaries of what they should, from an ethical point of view, be willing to print. I think the struggle concerning the Muhammad caricatures during the early 2000s shaped a lot of today's editors in a good way. Freedom of speech is tantamount to them as to any generation of editors, but I think they started approaching public debate and disagreement with a sense of duty to publish any point of view, based on the idea that the freer a public discourse is, the more points of view you introduce, the more real the democracy becomes. Problem is, and the only problem with that, I agree with most of that, but the only problem is that you don't account for the fact that some might try to participate in that conversation on a wholly different set of rules than everyone else. Like I talked about initially as well, you don't care if you get caught lying, you don't care if what you say is true. So from the media's point of view, you need to rethink how do we approach people who want to abuse our channels of information to attain power. Same goes with Samfundsmøte, same goes with politicians, same goes with everyone who discusses politics over lunch. We have to compartmentalize it, split it up more, right, and make it a question of responsibility and duty, I think.
But I think the important thing here is to know that it's perfectly possible to stop it, because what we feel now, it's just this massive tsunami of fake news, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. Yeah. Well, even so, in many countries, there are not populist leaders, and they're not dictatorships, you know. Yeah. And if we see historically, there have been waves of democratization and waves of autocratization, which is the opposite. And right now, well, after the Cold War, more and more democracies. Today, less and less. Yep. But that's going to change in some way. And there are 1,000 different answers. I think you've touched upon it in your. You said about persistence and patience. We need to build trust, etc. Many researchers now I'm falling in and out of this. Is that true? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'll just talk and you don't listen, but that's okay. Maybe eventually you hear one word or another. But I think there are many different answers. Some researchers point at the democratic institutions. They need to go on working even though they have a dictator on top. They need to do the best. Some point at the universities and the students, or other point at mass mobilization. But I think what we, each and every individual here, what we can do is, talk about it, organize talks like this. Right. We just need to go on and do the same democratic practices that we've done forever. Right. So it's the same things that we have been doing, actually.
Okay. It's very interesting. Eleanor Lindström could prepare for a question. Yeah, definitely. Sorry, how do you think, so we've talked now a bit about Brazil and the US, or like larger countries where I think there's perhaps less trust, as you've touched upon. How do you think the issue is seen in Norway? Do you think it's a big issue in Norway, or is it something we should think a lot about?
I think we should be less afraid of it. Nasjon had that's a newspaper. They had a piece yesterday about Sigbjørn Gjelsvik, I have no idea what kommunalminister is in English. Right. And he refuses to lay forward a report from FFI because it contains a scenario pertaining fake news, including the conflict regarding EU and EØS. I think that's the wrong approach. Making it more mystical and more dangerous than it really is the wrong approach, especially in a country like Norway. And I think we need to have kind of, yeah, this is a cliche, me being the former socialist politician saying this, but we need a materialist approach to this. I think we need to acknowledge that one of the reasons that the rise of fake news propaganda, the use of lies systematically to gain power, was so prevalent in the 30s and is becoming prevalent again now, has something to do with economics, something to do with social upheaval, something to do with the fact that a lot more people today feel that society isn't working for them than 10 or 20 years ago. That would be the case for the US, for Brazil, but also for Europe after a financial crisis. So this isn't just a meta debate or an intellectual debate or a debate about ideas. It's also a debate about how policy is actually working and making people feel, well, the politicians are on my side, the media works to my benefit.
Yeah. I think definitely, well, I agree, but just have to have two international examples. In the United States, the voters, they managed to get rid of Trump after one period. Yep. In Brazil, the voters will probably, if we trust the polls that are of the election in 8 days, they will manage to get rid of Bolsonaro after the first period. So it's perfectly possible. So I think just having the trust that it is possible, I think that's a very good starting point.
Right. Eleanor Lindström, can I ask her a question?
Good evening. My name is Eleanor and I'm a member. And there has been a lot of talk about the fake news that you base your understanding of reality on. And with all these different kinds of parallel truths out there, you end up with having difficulties with just normal conversation and discussions with people that have a fundamentally different truth or worldview than you have. So my question is actually, what kind of arenas do we create that make it possible to talk? Because it seems really difficult to come to an event like this and know that my beliefs will be challenged now. And my truths are not the truths that will be discussed in this forum. So these difficult conversations, how do you create a good environment for that? The conversations of people with completely different beliefs. And as an extra question, I'm so curious, how was your 35-minute talk? Because I can't imagine that you started with, hello, I'm writing a book critiquing you and explaining how you destroy democracy. Nice breakfast. So please tell me a little bit about that talk.
Okay.
Right. Just right before you start answering, Andrea Stalvik can get ready to ask her question.
If I can just start, because it's a really difficult question to answer, and it goes to the core of one of the big challenges of our times. But I think we need to believe and see that some truths are more. There is a truth out there, and it's possible to detect a lie. It's possible to detect fake news. As Snorre said in his introduction, it's not enough to pinpoint that and to say that you're lying or that's a lie, but we need to believe that there is a factual reality out there, and we need to relate to that. And I think, and at the same time, we must acknowledge that that our opponents or people that disagree with us, they have their reasons and they believe in what they believe in, and we must respect them for that, as long as they respect, the rules of the game, the democracy. But of course, in the case of Brazil, that's a massive problem that the president of the country doesn't respect those democratic rules. Not a very good answer, perhaps, but that's at least a start. There is some truth out there, and we need to keep to that.
I want to hear about the breakfast.
Well, I want to hear your answer to the question, because I'm really curious. I don't have a good answer.
I don't know. On the one hand, I'm a bit afraid of making everything a question of social policy. I believe in individual responsibility and choice. And sometimes we have a tendency to victimize everyone who adheres to the new fascist ideas or gets aboard the Trump bandwagon. They're victims, they're marginalized, poor them. If only we have done this or this differently, then they wouldn't have, supported white supremacy and stormed the parliament. And I think most adult people are perfectly capable of not storming the parliament. But on the other hand, most success stories on an individual level that I've heard, I used to believe in the QAnon conspiracy theory, or I used to be a Trump supporter and now I support democracy. They are about personal contact. Someone connects with you, someone stays with you over time and discusses with you, and together in search of those basic facts that Torkjell talked about. So I think the conversation should start on the lowest possible level. It's much easier for a friend or a colleague or a sister or brother to reach
and try to find some common ground.
Yeah,
and start from
there.
Not directly into the most complicated and the most aggressive.
But that does not mean we should say, "Oh yeah, perhaps genocide is a good idea. Let's have a discussion." So this is on a personal, individual, very local level. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, very briefly then about.
Yes, okay.
I would love to talk about this talk with Bolsonaro, but that made it was really important for me, and of course, as a researcher, so far my life's, by far the best thing I've ever managed to do. So, and it was quite surreal, but it made me understand that Bolsonaro, he lives in this Cold War world. He has a very strange view of the value of life. He doesn't respect life very much. It's and the whole concept of truth is just irrelevant. So, and everything he says is just a mix of lies and fake news and half-truths, and also things that are true, but just everything mixed up. So it's really hard to go into discussion, because if you have to answer, well, this and that was partly correct, that's out of context, that's a lie, but that's correct. So you instead of talking about what's the deal here, you end up talking about statistics and sources and interpretations of data. So it's and he has a very shallow level of understanding issues. What struck me afterwards, trying to get everything down and getting it into the book, is that he seldom said more than 3 or 4 phrases about the same subject. I sat there for 45 minutes. I had my answer, my questions. I chose very consciously a very diplomatic approach. I didn't want to criticize him or argue or say that's a lie, Mr. President, because then I would have been thrown out, of course. And I wanted to maximize the time and get everything from him with his own words. But it's his modus operandi is just saying all these lies and half-truths, because that has brought him to the presidential palace. So he's not going to stop doing that. And I think, on the contrary, if he's re-elected, it will only get worse, and the attacks on democracy will only get worse. So Brazil will continue sliding away from democracy.
Right. Andrea Stalvik can ask your question, and Ola Mæhle can get ready to ask his question.
Ærede Storskjell, my name is Andrea and I'm a member. You guys did briefly touch upon the subject, but I want to delve a little bit deeper. So in the introductory speeches, there were some statistics thrown around about the amount of fake news targeted at the right wing and the amount of fake news targeted at the left wing. So going out on a bit of a limb, like we're at Samfundsmøte on a Saturday, I'd say the majority of the people in this room are pretty left-wing leading. We're also pursuing a higher education. We believe in science. We're probably not the main demographic being targeted by these right-wing authoritarian leaders and their fake news. So what use is there in us sitting in a bit of an echo chamber of a room discussing this? And I'm sure you've written a wonderful book, but how many right-wing leading people have really read this book? And how do we reach these people? Thank you.
Yeah.
Good question. Yeah. Are we in an echo chamber tonight?
Most people are. And social media, they put us there and they help us to stay there. So that's a very personal, very maybe egoistic answer, but one of my main tasks in my research was to reach out to the Bolsonaro supporters, because most of my friends, not all of them, and the George, who you saw in that picture, he's a fanatic Bolsonaro fan. So, but most of my friends, they don't support Bolsonaro. So I think we need to get out there and talk to people to try to understand what are their arguments, what is their worldview, and how did you end up there, and how can we kind of, and again, find some common ground. And my book is, of course, an attempt to try to pinpoint what's going on here and what do Brazilians believe, how can we fix this. So that's the whole last chapter is about interviewing a lot of different Brazilian supporters of Bolsonaro and opponents of Bolsonaro about, okay, how should we make Brazil a more just and a less polarized country? But I think, yes, we must acknowledge that most of us, we live in a kind of a biased world, but again, but it's not. I don't think it's a coincidence that the data from Brazil saying that most of the fake news are in favor of the right wing. That has been it's a global phenomenon. The far right has been the best in working these algorithms to their favor. So
Why do you think that is?
I think that the extreme, both extremes have, and that's also an argument you hear the extreme left and extreme right say. Well, mainstream media, they don't let us talk, they don't allow our texts to be printed. It's censorship. Mainstream media is censored. And they're controlled by the left wing. That's what you hear from the right wing. And I think again with Bolsonaro as the example. A person that has been so extreme for decades, he had no channel through the regular media because he was too extreme and he offended people and he was racist and he was, So then having a direct channel and discovering social media, going directly into people's computers and their headphones, and you have a direct, uncensored, unfiltered channel. It was just El Dorado for these people. But on both extremes, of course. But the right has been the group, being most successful.
Right.
It's a very good question, and it also raises the issue of why does someone spread fake news? And some does it to gain power. It's part of a strategy, a willful strategy. To influence or subvert a democracy. Others do it because it fits with their perceived agenda, but they don't know or are not aware who's behind it in the first place. In a Norwegian context, I agree. I agree with Andrea, is it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That also I think also in Norway, most of the hard fake news is probably coming from the right. But since February, I think most of the most damaging fake news that has been circulating in social media has been, at least as much been spread by the left. I've read the most creative stories about how Ukraine is fascist, how all Russia wants is security, how Boris Johnson sabotaged negotiations in April, how we could have had peace now hadn't it been for fill in here. So none of us are immune. I think that the left wing also has an issue with managing to filter out that tempting information that passes you by and that helps your cause and that you might use to win the upper hand in an argument, even though you perhaps far back in your head know that it's probably not true. And I think the required level of critical thought is not sufficient neither on the Norwegian right or the Norwegian left right now, and that's actualized by the invasion of Ukraine, I think.
Ola Mæhle can ask his question, and Katja Brødholt can get ready.
Hello, my beloved Storsal. My name is Ola, and I'm a member. I wrote down my question. Snorre, thank you. You mentioned in your introduction that we as Norwegians saw getting caught lying as an embarrassment, but that might have changed in the later years. Why have we possibly been desensitized to lying? Is the answer as easy as the media, or is there a more significant sociological answer? And to the both of you, do you think we are in danger of becoming a society that accepts lying as the staple thing?
Who would like to start?
Well, the short answer is I don't know, and I don't know. I think what's the English term for mengdetrening?
Good question.
You get my point. I think when something is prevalent enough and happens often enough, it loses some of its power. I'm a member of the government-appointed extremist commission, and we are due to deliver a white paper to the government next year. And we discussed this in our meeting this week, actually, that we have noticed that the Quran burning that Sion is doing to provoke around the country is getting less media attention now than a year ago, even though they keep threatening to do it. And I think one of the reasons is that it loses its shocking appeal at some point. I think lies in the public is potentially something of the same. It shocks us when a politician lies to our faces, like Bush did with Iraq in 2003. Nobody gets shocked anymore when the American president lies to you. So that's the route to hell, I think. I don't think we, as a country, are in acute danger of getting there, but something the past year should teach us is that most things we take for granted, even in Norway, are up for conflict, up for grabs, up for debate.
Yeah, I have nothing to add, I think.
Thanks.
I just want to quickly give the word to Unna.
Yes, thank you. I would like to suggest for Storsalen that in 2 minutes you can no longer sign up for questions.
Cool. I would give the word to Katja Brødholt, and Julie Koren can get ready to ask her question.
Hi, my name is Katja, and I'm a member. As an American, I was horrified by the outcome of the last election, and I'm currently facing another one on the 8th of November. When I'm home, I'm inundated with commercials cutting and pasting headlines, interview clips, short statements together to sway my vote one way or another. They very obviously galvanize the extremist sides. And what's clear about the US is that these ads are often bought and funded by lobbyists. I'm currently under the impression that this is a very American phenomenon, but I'm curious what you think, what kind of role lobbyism takes in other countries where we see a rise in extremist ideologies, and also how does money play into this fake news media cycle? Who pays for it? Thanks.
Yeah, again, well, excellent question. If I start, and I again will look at Brazil, which is the case that I know the best, it's not a US phenomenon. This happens in Brazil, this happens in Russia, this happens in a lot of these countries we've been talking about today. And one of the common denominators here is Mr. Steve Bannon, which I showed you. He's been on a European tour, on a world tour actually, trying to gather the nationalist and right-wing populist authoritarian leaders in this thing called the movement. Actually a movement of these nationalistic right-wing authoritarian leaders. It has not gained so much attention the last couple of years, so I'm not sure how effective and successful he has been. And Mr. Bannon himself has been in and out of jail over the last year, so that might complicate things, of course. But it's a very strategic approach, where many different people, and he's the most visible person, they're trying to gather all these people in a global movement. And of course, behind there are, there are of course lots of money and interest groups behind, but that's much harder to see who that is. In Brazil, in the elections, it's quite easy to see that the traditional elites in industry and finance and agribusiness and arms and ammunitions and etc. They have been supporting Bolsonaro for many years and very hardly in the last elections. So and very openly. But yeah, that was the start. The start, at least a Brazilian answer to your very good question.
Very short. It's not uncommon or unknown to Norway either. I mean, Reset, they had kind of an implosion this spring, but they've dominated much of the, what should I say, populistic, demagogue right media landscape for many years. They're founded and funded by very, very rich individuals in Norway. That was kind of a new thing with Reset, but it's happened here as well. But traditional lobbying in Norway has a very, very distant role from what we see in Norway of fake news and propaganda. They're much more corporative, traditional, influencing politicians to gain some kind of advantage stuff. Yeah.
Right. I just want to now say that it's no longer possible to sign up to ask more questions. Could please Julie Koren ask her question and Egil Swan get ready to ask their question.
Hi, my name is Julie Koren. I'm a member. And I was fascinated by who asked the question about echo chambers and stuff. Because most of us are students here and we're used to really digging into the literature and being critical of sources and all of this. And I was writing a paper the other day and really digging into the literature, and I was thinking, fuck, this is hard. And myself, I'm a student with almost 5 years of higher education now, and I was thinking, like, this is really hard, and challenging yourself beyond like your beliefs and really trying to figure out what is the actual truth here. And so my question to you is, what role do you think that universities and academic institutions have in all of this? Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. You want to go first, Snorre?
Yeah,
eager.
Yeah, I'm a debate editor, so one of my major headaches for the past 3 years has been getting students and researchers and academia in general to participate in the public debate. Not only about student welfare or the campus project, but I can't believe I'm saying this, but almost every other group or profession in society are better at formulating their thoughts and political ideas, putting them to paper and submitting them to newspapers than academia. And it's a tragedy. We have, I think, 6,000 employees at NTNU or something, 25,000 students, no op-eds. So yeah, I think academia has a major role in tackling this issue, and I think at best they have failed for the past 10 years. So,
and very importantly, universities and academia, they are among the main targets for the right-wing authoritarian populists. And that's not a coincidence. Because these leaders and these forces, they don't want us to believe in science. They don't want us to believe in truth. They don't want, the real knowledge to get out to most people. They want to dominate themselves. So it makes it even more important for you guys to participate in the public debate and talk to your friends and talk to your aunts and uncles and maybe those in the family or neighbors that are, more lean towards what they read on Facebook.
Right. Super short point.
Yeah, one final thing. What we need is you to show us how science is made. We don't need more of those elevrådsledare types that writes in the paper, this is the answer, this is the objective truth, you are wrong. What we need is the differences and the disagreements happening within the academic circles. Make them understandable, show them to us, fight in public. That's how you get people to trust academia and truth and science. Yeah.
Right.
Has he mentioned that he's the editor of Did you mention that?
Egil Swan can ask their question.
Ære Storsal, mitt navn Egil, jeg medlem. I want to challenge you on something that you both said regarding how we meet people who have fallen for conspiracy theories and fake news. So the Overton window, it argues that there's a fluid center of discourse in political society which is pushed left and right by how politicians speak. So my question is that when we counter people like Trump with Biden or Sylvi Listhaug with Ola Borten Moe, are we not legitimizing far-right rhetoric by pretending like there's a middle ground when one side wants to kill all Jewish people and one side don't? Is there really a middle ground there? Why should we meet them on the middle ground, and why do we always have to go high when they always go low? Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I start?
Yeah.
I'll start by citing the two biggest newspapers in Norway, VG and Aftenposten, and how they reacted to the first round of the presidential elections in Brazil just 2 weeks ago. They, in different phrasings, said that Bolsonaro and Lula are representing the extremes or the radical right and the radical left. And that's completely wrong. And that's a really, really dangerous path and understanding. They have been covering the elections very well, but this was news, and I think there were different journalists, and they had, they were only reading international coverage and just translating it, because that's completely wrong. What you see is something that Snorre was mentioning earlier, that the middle ground here is moving, or was one of you guys asking the question? The middle ground here is moving. So where one candidate, Lula, has moved for 30 years from a Marxist radical left party into the center. He's as radical as Jonas Gahr Støre.
Right.
And he has support from far left to the moderate right, while Bolsonaro is on the extreme right. So it's wrong, and it's dangerous to present it like it's the two extremes or the two poles here. That's kind of normalizing the extreme. That's part of normalizing the extreme positions and the extreme rhetorics, which we must be very, very, very careful not to do.
Right. We are unfortunately running out of time. So do you perhaps want to do the last point?
Oh, thanks.
Yes.
No, I totally agree. When I say middle ground, I mean, when I say common ground, I mean actual common ground. What can you actually agree upon? There is no middle ground between authoritarianism and democracy, respect for all humans, or segregation, or even worse, genocide. And that's the major fallacy of the liberal democracies and the liberal media, which I'm a part of for the past 10 to 20 years, has been the idea that every troll disintegrates in the sun. That, I think the more we let the trolls shout in media, the more people they reach. So yeah, I agree, and I think we should stop treating especially the far right as some kind of victim that we have to help extra in order to showcase our own love for free speech. I think we've reached a point where also the media itself has to acknowledge that people like Steve Bannon or Bolsonaro or Orban are also a threat to the very idea of freedom of speech in itself. That means you cannot remain neutral as such in such a question.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Torkjell Lara. Thank you, Snorre Valen. Please give them a round of applause. And I will now give the word back to Unna.
Thank you, and thank you for a very interesting discussion. Yes, if you want, you can go and take a seat back in the audience. You can stay, of course, yeah. Okay, so we've come to point 12 in the meeting agenda, any other business or eventuelt, as we call it in Norwegian. So the podium is open. Are there any statements here? It's hard to see with the light in my face, but I don't see anyone running up. Then we have our next point, which is critique of the meeting. Are there any statements here? Of course.
Thank you. My name is Bor, I'm a member. I wanted to say how extremely happy I am that the board chose to do this meeting in English, entirely in English. And I know that's hard, maybe harder than doing it in your native language. And I want to say also that Unna and Annika, Anders, Inga, you all, and everyone else involved, you all did very well. But the reason that I say this is kind of also personal for me, because I guess as many of you know, I have not been in Norway very long. I moved here late October 2018, actually 4 years and 2 days ago, and I joined Samfundsmøte in January 2019, and at that time, since I spoke, I was happy to become a member of a group at Samfundsmøte, but I spoke very little Norwegian, if not no Norwegian at all. So going to Samfundsmøte was very low on my list of priorities as someone who didn't understand the language spoken mostly, the topics that were addressed, and kind of missing the background. And I remember very vividly that in March 2019 there was then suddenly a meeting in English, and the theme was Brexit. It was really, really good, and that was the first one that I went to. And I remember that at this Brexit meeting I was extremely impressed, not only because, you know, the meeting was really good. Samfundsmøte somehow got the British ambassador to Norway to come here and sit and discuss the Brexit with us, just on a normal human-to-human level. But also because I really liked the concept. I liked this, okay, we're here on a Saturday and we're gonna learn about some kind of arbitrary topic, and everyone can come up and ask questions and say, you know, intelligent things or other things, and we all have this kind of, we have this going. And I really enjoyed this, and that was kind of a moment when I decided, okay, I will keep coming to this, and I will see this as a part of my learning Norwegian, and I will learn many words related to many weird topics. And I was very lucky that I had several really good friends like Ludwig, who's here, but also Christian and Ola and many others who I could poke and say, what does this mean? Or what is this word? And at some point when I kind of started forcing myself to ask questions in my horrible Norwegian, I usually could let Ludwig read it on my phone and correct the grammar, and then I would read it out wrongly also. So this was not great, but it was a very good way of learning the language. So for me, this English Samfundsmøte was really a kind of a turning point. And it doesn't happen that often. It's very nice that ISFIT takes the initiative to do this with the board, but it should not be on ISFIT, and it shouldn't be so rare as it is right now. So I really hope that the board, when they're planning next semester, and I hope also the boards after that, will kind of make this a common thing, that we have Samfundsmøte in English at least once a semester, and that this is not a it's not a challenge. It's actually an opportunity, because then suddenly the whole world can be your guest. You know, you can ask whoever. You're not restricted anymore to who can speak Norwegian, and it can be a way to reach out a hand to all kinds of international students that we have in this town, who are very desperate to become a part of Samfundet and Samfundet with double N, and who are very eager to see what we have. So this is a very long kritikk på møtet. I really like this, and I really like this great meeting that we've had with really good guests and really good effort by ISFIT and by the board. And I really hope we can follow up with this. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is still Eleanor, and I'm still a member. And this critique, I actually just really should have been up here in the political 5 minutes, but now I come up, and I just want to say that we have this political debate going, or it's a proposal in the budgets for all of Norway that international students outside of EU and the EEA should start to pay fees for studying in Norway. And I just wanted to say I was the student democracy at NTNU have their 25th Jubilee this evening, so they can't be here. But I take the responsibility, and I just want to say that the student representatives at NTNU really fight the cause that all international students should not pay fees to come to Norway. In Norway, we have this principle called gratisprinsippet, which it means that it is free to educate yourself in Norway. And when I speak to people outside of Norway, this is one of the things that I am most proud of whole of Norway. Being a Norwegian, I am so proud that we have free education. So we need to speak up. We were engaged to do it earlier in the SOFA talk. We as students should speak up. And Wednesday, I think, there is a protest here in Storsalen at 4 o'clock against this. And actually, I heard a speech just earlier this evening at the Jubilee of the student democracy here from the prorektor for utdanning, vice chancellor of education at NTNU, that they also, as NTNU, really fight this proposal. So please take part of this protest and speak up as a student to protect free education in Norway for all students. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ida, and I'm a member. And I would also just like to say that I really love that this meeting is in English, but it doesn't stay on the webpage, and it doesn't say it on the Facebook event, or I at least couldn't find it anywhere. So it's like kind of hard for people that speak English that want to come to the meeting to know that the meeting is in English if it doesn't say anywhere. So that's only my little critique, or else it was really good meeting. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nikolai. I would just like to critique the fact that this meeting is actually about fake news, and that it wasn't fake news. Tänk lite på det.
Thank you very much. Okay. Before we go on about the night, I would like to thank those who have contributed to organize this meeting. I would like to thank Forsterkerkomiteen for audio, Regi for lights, Videokomiteen for video, Café Serveringsgjengen for drinks from the bar, FG for pictures, TSS for music, Markedsføringsgjengen for marketing, Lørdagskomiteen for help, Rådet for counseling, our guests, of course, Snorre Valen og Torkjell Leira. ISFIT for this collaboration, both for working with us today and arranging the SOFA discussion. And last but not least, thank you to everyone who've asked questions and everyone who came to this Samfundsmøte. Later tonight, Astrid S is playing here in Storsalen, and at midnight, Y Kai is playing at Knaus. On Wednesday, we are arranging the demonstration that Eleanor talked about against tuition for international students here in Storsalen. At Wednesday, the debate committee is also arranging a debate Reform I toppform. On Thursday, ISFIT will be announcing the Student Peace Prize here in Storsalen. and next week's meeting will be Festmøte Monster. I wish you all a great evening. The meeting is adjourned. Good night.